Welcome to The Explainer. I am so glad you're here today because we are unpacking a moment that literally shifted the landscape of modern sports. Have you ever wondered how a single, totally everyday hand gesture could completely alter international football history? Well, at the 2026 FIFA World Cup, Paraguayan star Miguel Almirón found out the hard way. He became the first player ever to get sent off under FIFA's unprecedented and highly controversial new mouth covering rule. The entire global football community was left absolutely stunned. Today, we're going to break down exactly how and why this went down. A single gesture, one VAR view, history made. I mean, for decades, players covering their mouths while talking to opponents, teammates, or refs was just a routine part of the game, right? We've all seen it on our screens, guys pulling their jerseys up over their lips or cupping their hands to hide what they're saying from lip readers and cameras. It was a tiny, everyday motion that no one thought twice about. But suddenly, on the world's absolute biggest stage, this exact gesture triggered a catastrophic consequence for one player and his national team. Section 1. A historic World Cup red. Okay, let's dive into this specific match and set the scene for where this unprecedented moment actually took place. Picture the setting. It's the 2026 World Cup, a ridiculously high-stakes group stage match between Paraguay and Turkey. The tension is totally palpable. We're nearing the end of the first half, which is always that crucial psychological point in a game where emotions run high and fatigue is just starting to set in. And the outcome? Absolutely shocking. Paraguay's talisman Miguel Almirón gets shown a red card. But the way this sending off unfolded was completely unlike anything fans or pundits had ever witnessed in tournament history. Just watch how fast this escalation happens. It starts with a standard heat-of-the-moment confrontation. Almiron gets into a quick verbal exchange with Turkish defender Mert Milder. Honestly, this kind of friction happens in almost every professional match. But within seconds, as Almiron is speaking, he raises his hand and deliberately covers his mouth. Play continues briefly, but then there's the dreaded signal. A VAR review is initiated. For several agonizing minutes, the video assistant referees analyze this interaction. When referee Yvonne Barton returns to the pitch, he doesn't pull out a yellow for time wasting or a minor foul. Nope, he shows Almiron a straight red card. A player was ejected from a World Cup match simply for where he placed his hand while speaking. Wild, right? Section 2. The origin of the rule. So you're probably asking yourself, why on earth would FIFA suddenly start punishing a habit that players have literally been doing for years? To really understand this, we have to pivot and look at the history behind this sweeping regulation. The true catalyst for this dramatic shift happened a bit earlier in 2026, during a massive Champions League match involving Real Madrid's Vinicius Jr. and Benfica's Gianluca Prestiani. During a really heated exchange, Prestiani allegedly made severely abusive and discriminatory comments toward Vinicius. But here's the catch. Because Prestiani covered his mouth during the altercation, it was entirely impossible for video evidence or lip readers to verify exactly what was said. That lack of visual evidence left disciplinary committees paralyzed in a total he-said-she-said scenario. They literally couldn't enforce their own conduct rules. And this incident didn't just fade away into the news cycle. It sparked an absolute firestorm. It became the epicenter of a massive, global debate about hidden abuse in football. Look, for years, governing bodies have tried to eradicate racism and discriminatory language from the sport, but this incident exposed a glaring loophole. Players were using the act of covering their mouths as a shield to hurl abuse without consequence. It set up this profound conflict between a player's right to privacy, the ability to have a quick tactical or emotional chat on the pitch, and the urgent, undeniable need to curb the toxic, abusive language plaguing the sport. Section 3. Pushing for pitch transparency. Facing mounting pressure from anti-racism organizations, fans, and human rights groups, FIFA and football's lawmakers decided they had to take sweeping, decisive action. So here is the exact definition of the regulation they rolled out right before the 2026 World Cup. FIFA's mouth-covering rule dictates that players will receive a straight red card if they deliberately cover their mouths while confronting opponents. The primary goal here? Total pitch transparency. Just think about everyday workplace communication standards for a second. If you're in a corporate office and you cover your mouth or whisper behind your hand while aggressively confronting a coworker, well, human resources would likely view that as pretty hostile or uncooperative behavior, right? FIFA is essentially applying those modern workplace transparency standards directly to the football pitch, demanding that all interactions during confrontations are completely visible and subject to review. And this brilliantly illustrates the philosophy driving the rule change. FIFA president Gianni Infantino was incredibly vocal in his support, stating, If players have nothing to hide, there should be no need to hide their mouths during heated exchanges. It's a very straightforward, zero-tolerance approach. FIFA's stance is that in the modern game, where we literally have dozens of high-definition cameras capturing every possible angle, intentionally hiding your words during an aggressive encounter is inherently suspicious. They argue it goes completely against the spirit of fair play. So, the crucial point is this. We have to look at the specific context of the Miguel Almirón incident. It is absolutely vital to understand that Almiron was not officially accused of using racist or discriminatory language toward Mert Mulder. Let me repeat that because it's key. There was no allegation of verbal abuse. Zero. The punishment came purely because he violated the procedural rule itself. He covered his mouth during a confrontation. FIFA's new position dictates that the mere act of hiding speech in those hostile situations is now enough to trigger severe disciplinary action. It literally does not matter what words were actually spoken. Section 4. Fairness versus accountability. Naturally, ejecting a star player from the World Cup for covering his mouth, especially when no abuse was actually proven, led to an incredibly intense and highly polarized debate worldwide. Let's impartially break down the two sides of this debate because it's a fascinating one. On the side of accountability, supporters of the rule heavily praise FIFA for finally taking a tougher, uncompromising stance against hidden abuse. They argue that if you want to effectively combat racism, you need structural changes that promote total transparency. Taking away the literal shield of covering the mouth is seen as a necessary evolution. On the flip side, the argument for fairness is rooted in the belief that an automatic straight red card is just far too harsh a punishment for a procedural violation. Critics point out that since Almiron wasn't even accused of racist language, the punishment simply doesn't fit the crime. They argue it severely infringes on player privacy and micromanages basic human reactions in high-stress environments. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer weight of this moment. Regardless of which side of the accountability versus fairness debate you fall on, the impact is undeniable. Miguel Almirón is the very first player in the vast, storied history of the World Cup to be sent off under this specific mouth-covering rule. He is the ultimate test case. He's the precedent that every single referee, player, and coach is going to reference moving forward. We've seen how a desire to enforce workplace-style transparency and combat terrible abuse led to one of the most shocking red cards in football history. We've explored the really tricky balance between player privacy rights and the absolute necessity of curbing discrimination on the pitch. But ultimately, this is an ongoing dialogue. Was FIFA right to prioritize absolute accountability? Or does a straight red card for a covered mouth totally sacrifice fairness? Where exactly do we draw the line between policing bad behavior and policing body language? It's a massive dilemma, and I highly encourage you to think about where you stand on it. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the rules that shape the games we love.